Welcome to Executive Leaders Radio, your spot in the corner office, the radio show where executives share their secrets to success. Executive Leaders Radio.
You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, with my co-hosts, including Shannon Lane, Newmark Knight Frank, Drew Hanlon, Ethan Milrod, Go2 Tech, Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, and Daily Tipton, Evolution Energy Partners. And Matthew, would you please give us an idea of who we have on the air with us today?
Sure can. I'm looking forward to today's show, Herb. We're starting off with Loree Jones, the CEO of Philabundance. Then we have Heather Templeton Dill, the president of the John Templeton Foundation, followed by Logan Herring, the CEO of Reach Riverside, and wrapping up with Jim Price, the president of Aegis Property Group.
Let's get to know our first guest, Loree Jones, who's the CEO of Philabundance. Loree, what is Philabundance? What are you guys doing?
Philabundance is the region's largest hunger relief agency, providing meals to about 90,000 neighbors across southeastern Pennsylvania and South Jersey.
Whoa. Where are you from originally?
I'm from both Philadelphia and a little town in South Jersey.
How many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
I have one older brother.
And 8 to 14 years old, what was going on with you? What were the primary things you were involved with?
Between 8 and 14, I was going to school, studying hard, working hard to get A's. I was also spending a lot of time with my family in church and with my family outside of church.
Okay. Drew, what kind of questions you got, Drew?
I was just curious, the first time, you saw your family sort of giving back.
I saw my mother, especially my family members, giving back to people close to home. So that meant giving money to family members who needed it, but also providing meals to families in the church who needed a little bit of extra help.
And what did that mean to you at a young age, seeing your parents do that?
It became part of the norm, something that we all had to do. I felt sad for the people who needed the help, but also proud that my mom was helping in that way.
Ethan?
Loree, were you, can you remember, were you going with your mom? I think you were telling us a story earlier on about delivering food, or what was that?
Yeah. I remember going along with my mom when she had prepared meals for a family that needed some extra food. So I remember riding along in the car with her, helping her carry the food into the family.
And what did that mean to you? What effect did that have on you, watching your mom deliver food like that?
First and foremost, I felt sad for the family that needed that extra help. But I also was happy and proud to see my mom doing that. And I felt good, actually, helping myself.
How about today? Do you have an opportunity to see some of the people that you help at Philabundance? Aren't you helping them in the same way, Loree?
Absolutely. That's what Philabundance does. The team I get to work with helps people who are experiencing food insecurity across the region. So folks that are really vulnerable, and providing them with much needed help.
And what does that mean to you?
It feels great. I believe that everybody can be great because everybody can serve. And so to be part of the solution, to be part of helping our neighbors is something that's definitely a great source of pride, and it's humbling as well.
Daily?
You talked about church and school and your family. What other outside influence did you have? Who motivated you? Well,
I was born January 15th, 1969. So that means that I came into this world on the day that would have been Martin Luther King's 40th birthday. And so that has always been a point of pride and a call to action for me.
Tell us more about that. How does that apply in life?
Absolutely. I think King, as a Nobel laureate, a civil rights leader, is one of our greatest Americans. He's really pushed us as a country to live up to our ideals. And so that's something that's always been a part of who I am. I've studied King. I studied at the King Papers Project, both in Atlanta and in California. And I definitely believe in the ideals and what he
How's that affecting your role as CEO of Philabundance, Martin Luther King and his ideals?
Absolutely. He definitely said that everybody can be great because everybody can serve, but he also believed that we weren't all going to do well as a people if everybody wasn't doing better. And so he promoted social justice, he promoted anti-poverty efforts, and that definitely is a core of what we do every day at Philabundance.
Matthew?
Yeah, Loree, I'm curious, how young were you when you were striving to get those A's and having success at school? What's your earliest memory of that?
Really, really early. I attended a school in Philadelphia called Ivy Leaf, a private school. And so I actually was one of the students, a little embarrassed to say, one of the students that they would bring up to the front when parents were coming in to demonstrate that somebody so young knew how to read. And so I learned at an early age that academic excellence was accepted, expected, and to be celebrated.
And we also talked earlier about accepting challenges and how young you were when you were doing that. And you told us a little bit about camp. Can you tell us about that now?
Yeah, when I was probably in middle school and early high school, I worked as a camp counselor versus a junior camp counselor, volunteering and then getting paid a couple dollars a week for that. And so that probably was an early time when I became a leader among the other camp counselors and then for the students in our camp.
What did you do? How did you lead?
I would sometimes help develop curriculum, help develop the programs that we would teach people in those camps.
And did you have to work, how did the other kids take it? How did you get the other counselors to take your curriculum ideas?
One of the ways that I was able to do that was by talking with them and soliciting their ideas as well. And so I've actually found that in life, that when you bring people together and solicit ideas, you can not just promote your own, but co-develop better ideas together. That
sounds like something you might be using as a leader at Philabundance, is it?
Absolutely. A collaboration is one of our core values here at Philabundance, and definitely I would say across my career, I've seen and experienced the most success when a variety of people have gotten together to solve a problem together.
It seems to me also you took, one of the reasons, or you had an experience where you got pretty good grades and the school would use you in front of all the other parents, and you got comfortable being in the limelight. Did that prepare you for your role as CEO of Philabundance, which is a rather public entity here in the city of Philadelphia?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, at a young age, being celebrated and being kind of brought to the front is definitely something that
Didn't you also have a role with the city of Philadelphia?
I did. I had the honor of serving as managing director or chief operating officer.
A rather public role as well. So you've served in these very public roles. Evidently, you got comfortable taking the limelight. Shannon?
Laura, we talked a little bit about your mom and what she was like. I'm curious to hear about your dad and what he was like when you were growing up.
Yep. My dad is someone who I adore and who adores me. I talk to every day. Love him. He's wonderful. But like many families, my family split up when I was young, and that was really tough.
And how old were you when they split up?
About 11 or 12.
And how did that make you feel?
Those were really tough times. To be that young and have a close-knit family that was separating, it was something I didn't understand, made me very sad. And part of it also made me feel a little bit out of control. I wasn't able to help the family stay together. I really wanted my dad to stay, but that didn't happen. Really tough time in my life.
And how does that time in your life relate to what you're doing today at Philabundance?
Yeah. I think that part of what I felt when the family was breaking up, I wanted to solve that problem. I wanted them to stay together, and I felt out of control. And I realized that when people fall on hard times, one of the challenges, they don't have control. They don't have agency. They're not empowered. And definitely empowering people, engaging people to solve their own problems and have the resources they need is something we try to do every day in my work.
Mm-hmm. Loree, I wanted to go back to, you said you had Martin Luther King on the record player at home, and I want to be like, what inspired you the most about MLK? Like, what was one or two things that you took away from listening to that over and over again?
Well, I definitely think that, Martin Luther King, what we all know about the I Have a Dream speech, that people will be judged by the content of their character as opposed to what they look like. So that if you did well, if you strove, if you had something to contribute, that would be valued and celebrated. That definitely is something that is struck me as important and stuck with me.
And just one other question, you came up through a little bit of a turbulent time, your parents breaking up. And what advice would you give a youth that maybe everything wasn't perfect and they had a little bit of an uphill battle in front of them? What would your advice be to them?
My advice to them would be to think about those things in your life and those people in your life where you can draw inspiration. I grew up with a mother who was very religious, took us to church. We spent Sundays in church. We spent summers at Vacation Bible School. So religion was a key part of support. And that's definitely I've returned to whenever I face challenges. I've had family members, despite the breakup, who loved and supported me. That's been a source of strength. And so I would encourage people to think about where they can find inspiration in their homes, in their religion, and even with outside leaders.
Sounds to me like, isn't it possible that you're delivering more than food to these 90,000 folks each week?
Absolutely. I think the folks at Philabundance are delivering hope to people as well. We're working to provide them with meals so they have what they need every day, but we're also working to address the root causes that lead to them being food insecure in the first place.
Mm-hmm. What kind of root causes?
Yeah. The challenges that we see across our society, folks that don't have the right education that's preparing them for jobs, folks that don't have access to jobs that are providing a livable wage, folks that have had other traumas in their lives, and mental health challenges that have led to them not being able to provide for their families.
What's the website address for this organization known as Philabundance?
Philabundance.org.
Let me have that one more time.
Philabundance.org.
You've been speaking with Loree Jones, who's the CEO of Philabundance here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break. Don't go away.
You now can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your advisors. Yes, this radio and online social media exposure is free and quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors.
We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Heather Templeton Dill, president of the John Templeton Foundation. Heather, what is the John Templeton Foundation?
The John Templeton Foundation is a $3 billion private foundation that gives away about $120 million annually to support academic research and public engagement on some of the deepest and most perplexing questions facing humankind.
Where were you from originally?
I am from Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Philadelphia.
How many brothers and sisters?
I have one younger sister.
And Drew, where do you want to go in the interview?
Yeah, Heather, it sounded like your dad was pretty inspiring to you. Can you tell us a little about him?
My father was a pediatric surgeon at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. So he worked long hours and spent a lot of time reaching that goal. And yet he was very dedicated to both my sister and me. We always felt like we could have his attention whenever we wanted.
How did he demonstrate that to you?
He gave us elaborate birthday parties. He didn't bring in anybody. He did it all himself. He planned the games. He organized the food. He cooked it. He was very much involved. And whenever we had a problem, he always had the time for us. When I was a senior in high school, somehow he made it to every single field hockey game. I don't know how he orchestrated his surgery schedule to do it, but that's what he did.
What did that mean to you to look over and see your dad at a game?
Well, first of all, he took pictures, so I have a great record of those games. But just to know that he cared. He didn't have sons to play baseball with, but he had daughters. We both played field hockey, and he took a distinct interest in our success. We lost the championship game as a senior when I was a senior in high school, and he was right there on the side of the field to hug me, tell me it was okay.
Drew? Heather, what was the effect of all that on who you are nowadays, the fact that Dad was at those games?
So I would say my father always made me feel that I could do whatever I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. He was a physician. He didn't push me to be a physician. He pushed me to be what I wanted to be. And he was really proud of me because I became a high school history teacher. That was my first job out of high school.
What's that have to do with who you are nowadays?
I think that being a teacher is a kind of being a leader, and the skills I learned about leading even a small group of people, trying to keep people engaged, are skills I apply to my work today.
When we talked in the green room, you talked about how important academics were and how much you motivated yourself. What influenced you to be so strong in school and go after it?
I had highly accomplished parents. So not only was my father a physician, my mother was also a physician, a pediatric anesthesiologist at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
And so what type of influence did that, what did that make you want to do?
it made me want to excel. My aspiration as a 9-year-old was to become a lawyer. I was going to go to Yale undergraduate, Harvard Law School, and become a lawyer who defended doctors. So I just was brought up in this culture of success and service.
Ethan?
Heather, how about sports? Did you play any sports as a teenager?
As a teenager, I played field hockey. Before that, my father introduced me to what he called lifetime sports, tennis, figure skating, and snow skiing.
Snow skiing. What was that like? Well, tell us a little bit. Weren't you telling us earlier that you like to do moguls?
Yes. So my father actually didn't ski because he had a football injury, and he just sent my sister and I off with various instructors. So it's just hard work, lots of consistency, taught me the value of learning to do something well, learning the actual skills, and then applying them.
Seems like there's this constant theme of being competition and liking a challenge. Would you say that that's true about you?
Yes, I am very competitive. When I am confronted with a challenge, I'd rather take it head on instead of give up.
So how's that helped you prepare for being the president of John Templeton Foundation?
Well, any leader will tell you that there is always a new challenge. So if you're having a peaceful day, you know that something else might come onto your plate. Something that you're not expecting. And when you've climbed up a mountain, accomplished a significant task, there's always the other mountain beyond it. And so my competitive spirit just keeps me going in the midst of that. And when I am faced with a challenge, I feel like I can't handle, there's only one way through, and that's to go through it.
Matthew?
So, Heather, you grew up with 2 parents who worked at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which, for those who are listening and don't know, is this incredible world-class organization. Institution. I'm curious, did you spend time as a kid at CHOP?
Yes. In the 1980s, you could go almost anywhere you wanted in a hospital. So I distinctly remember on at least one occasion doing rounds with my father. It was a Friday evening. I didn't have childcare for the night. And so I was dropped off at the hospital and we went and visited every patient. I remember being really impressed with how he cared for the parents as well as the child.
You said earlier that your parents and the docs there were superheroes. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'll give you an example. One time my father was taking my sister and me and a neighbor to the Philadelphia Zoo, and we heard this loud bang and then a whoosh of fire, and a car had gotten into an accident and caught on fire. And my father didn't think twice. I think I was 9 or 10. He just left us standing on the street and went running across the park to care for those people. He actually got in the ambulance and went off to the hospital. My mom was angry when she learned that he had left his 2 daughters and a neighbor on the side of the road, but he was going to the rescue is what he was called to do. I remember his shirt was splattered with blood. And when he came back, we went to the zoo.
And what impact does watching that have on you today?
I have profound respect for medical professionals. I am not a medical professional, but they put their lives on the line. They sacrifice family time. They sacrifice leisure to serve others. And that's what my parents were. That's what they embodied. And anyone who's in that career field embodies that.
Shannon?
Heather, you're the president, John Templeton Foundation. I'm curious who John Templeton is and what your relationship is to him.
John Templeton is my grandfather. He was from rural Tennessee. He is one of the first men to create a large mutual fund, and he was known for global investing. So recognizing that some of the best companies were outside the United States, and he ought to be investing in them.
And hearing these stories about your grandfather, what did that mean to you when you were a kid?
I knew my grandfather, and again, a model of hard work, a model of somebody who started with not a whole lot and did what he could with the resources he had. And even in his business career, he saw that as a mission and a way to serve people. So if he could help people save for retirement, then he was doing a service. And that's how he saw his business career.
What else are you thinking?
I just think, first of all, your grandfather was like a legend in the financial industry. His name's still well known today. And ultimately, though, he gave away most of his wealth, you said earlier, right? So what's that tell us about the Templeton family?
We are a philanthropically minded family. That started with my grandfather. In fact, actually, it goes back to his mother, who had her own garden, and she would take the excess from her garden and give it to people in the community who didn't have what she had. And so my grandfather, as he started to make money, he started to be philanthropic and served in a number of capacities. And my parents took that on as well. You always give back. You always take the resources you have and share.
You're faced with like a tough decision at the office, at the foundation. What do you hear your grandfather whispering in your ear?
Mm-hmm. So my grandfather was a businessman, and you make the best decision and you're not emotional about it.
Ethan?
Heather, what's your hope for the foundation moving forward into the future?
I hope that we will become better known. We are a large foundation, but we're not as well known as others. I also hope that people will engage with the work that we're doing. We are not engaged or supporting traditional humanitarian work. We think that's important, but we are engaged in helping people to better understand the purpose of being a human and contributing to the human soul and well-being in that respect.
You were telling us earlier, Heather, about a somewhat mixed election career as a kid. How did you handle the losses when you were a kid?
So that refers to the fact that I tried to serve on the student senate from 7th grade up through 10th grade and was never elected. Finally, in 11th grade, I was elected to class president and the following year to student council president. It just taught me to go for it and keep trying.
And what did your dad tell you after the losses that stays with you today?
He was always encouraging. He told me to never give up. And I think mostly he listened. He just let me lay it all out. He didn't try to solve the problem for me. He just listened. And if I wanted to do it again, he was my biggest cheerleader.
Heather, what's the website address for the John Templeton Foundation?
Templeton.org.
We've been speaking with Heather Templeton Dill, president of the John Templeton Foundation here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, we'll be back in a moment right after this break. Don't go away. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Logan Herring, CEO of Reach Riverside. Logan, what is Reach Riverside? What are you guys doing?
Reach Riverside is a community development corporation leading a $250 million revitalization of the most low-income neighborhood in the city of Wilmington, Delaware.
Whoa. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Wilmington.
Uh-huh. How many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
I have one sibling, an older brother, 13 years older.
Uh-huh. And what was the effect of your older brother on you?
Just being able to watch him set the stage for me going to college, being more of a father figure because my father wasn't really in the picture as I was growing up.
Mm-hmm. So you were raised by a single mom?
Yeah, single mother. She raised both of us. She's in the room in the apartment right now watching my son.
Mm-hmm. Ethan?
Logan, tell us a little bit more about Mom.
So Mom's been my biggest cheerleader ever since day one. I remember when I started playing soccer and basketball, she was the one running up and down the sidelines. That didn't change. When I was in college playing soccer and basketball, she was doing the same thing.
So your mom worked, right? She still made time to come to your games every single time, right? What did that mean to you, Logan?
It means, and it is still to this day, that I can always rely on her, always knowing that no matter what happens, I have somebody that has my back.
That's awesome. Tell us a little bit more about other people in your family that may have had an impact. Didn't you tell us that your grandfather really meant a lot to you?
Yeah, so my grandfather did all of the things that I'm doing now, but he did it back in the 60s and 70s. His name was Otis Herring, and he was a reverend. He ran Union Baptist Church here in Wilmington, Delaware. He was one of the biggest community civil rights leaders that the city has ever seen. When Jesse Jackson came to town, they stayed at his house.
Drew?
Yeah, what did the community think of your grandfather?
The community, to this day, he is a beloved figure, historical figure in this community. And having his last name of Herring helps me as a young leader in this community because it kind of gives me that credibility that I probably wouldn't have as being a 30-something-year-old CEO.
What did that mean at 10 years old to see, have your grandfather be that well respected in the community? What did that mean and feel like?
it didn't mean much back then as a kid. Just that, when I visit him, he'd go in his wallet and be able to give me a $20 bill, a $100 bill. And I'd be like, how can you do this? You're visually blind. Like, I want the 100. He's like, no, you get the 20. But, now that I'm older and doing this work and being able to research that he did all the things that I'm doing, it feels good to be able to carry out this legacy.
Mm-hmm. Daly?
So you talked about going to camp when you were a kid. Tell us about how that progressed, how you aspired there.
Well, I understand that you went to camp and then you became a camp counselor. And I'm wondering, when you became a camp counselor, what'd you do different than all the other camp counselors?
So I listened. I mean, going to 13 to 14, being in camp and then being a part of the leadership at camp, I knew that I had to listen because at some point they were my peers. They were my friends. And I wanted to do things that they would enjoy and not just do things because, we're a camp counselor. And that was the difference. So
this listening that you did as a camp counselor, what's that listening have to do with building this $250 million Reach Riverside organization and these affiliated organizations?
Yeah, so it's interesting that there is a connection. Reach Riverside, the tagline is with the community for the community. The warehouse is for teens by teens. Kingswood Community Center is to empower the community to reach its full potential is our mission. So in all of those, it is to empower and give voice to the voiceless.
Uh-huh. And didn't you mention earlier that you hope that what your grandfather started, you can finish or something like that? What was that all about?
Well, I know that my grandfather's watching over what I'm doing and saying he's extremely proud of what I'm doing, but he's probably also disappointed that I have to do it. So, I have a 3-year-old son, and I often joke that he's my succession plan. But at the end of the day, in 20 years, I don't want him to have to do this work that I'm doing now. And I'm pretty sure my grandfather probably thought the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Matthew?
Yeah, Logan, you told us earlier some stories about breaking bones on the playing field and your mom's reaction to it. What's that all about?
So my mom being a single mother, as a single mother, you often have to take on that role of trying to be the father figure as well at times. So whenever something would happen on the field or on the court, she would always say, oh, just get up and shake it off. So I broke my ankle twice in consecutive years, and her response was shake it off until she realizes that my ankle is at a 90-degree angle and my leg is the other way. And she's like, okay, yeah, we probably have to go to the hospital for this one. So just that resiliency, that grit, I use today.
How do you use it today?
Well, there's ups and downs in this job, and it's a very complex, dynamic, comprehensive project that we're running with all the particulars. And we have to be resilient that, sometimes we're going to get knocked down. Sometimes we're going to feel broken, but we got to get up and shake it off because there are a lot of people depending on us in this work. And if we get demoralized every day, that's not good.
Mm-hmm. Shannon?
Logan, you've mentioned your son LJ a few times now. I'm curious what he's taught you that affects the way you're building your team today.
Well, one, he's my motivation because I said I don't want him to have to deal with what I'm dealing with today. The other thing is he teaches me patience. But, what's interesting is my son is now a worldwide celebrity. He's on plenty of Joe Biden ads because we actually ran into Joe Biden the day after looting took place here in Wilmington, Delaware. I wanted to explain to my son as a 3-year-old Black boy growing up in America, what he's going to have to encounter. And as I walked down the street and explained to him what happened the night before, we run into Joe Biden and Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester, and they take a snapshot of us talking to one another. And that is my inspiration, is that I continue to pave a way where he doesn't have to face the barriers and obstacles that I've had to face as a Black man in America.
Mm-hmm. Drew?
Yeah, I was just curious. You played a couple high-level team sports in college. Like, what would your teammates tell us about you?
So interestingly enough, no matter what sport I played or at what level, I was always designated the captain. So I was the captain of the soccer and the basketball team in college. I think I've been put in those positions of power, not always wanting to be in them, but because I always look at team first and how we can galvanize to get the best product on the court or in the workplace. And so I would say that my teammates would always say I'm like the ultimate team player. And I'm going to sacrifice. I'm going to do whatever we have to do within reason to get the victory.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't you say earlier that one of the traits that you really prided yourself on was the ability to be a good listener?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm one person, and I think no matter where you are in a position in life, the one thing that you have to offer is your perspective. And I have 100 employees, I have 100 colleagues, I have 3 boards, I have tons of stakeholders. And if I don't have the ability to listen, that's why I have big ears, by the way. If I don't have the ability to listen proportionally to my mouth, the one mouth I have, then I really don't think we can affect change, because again, this is a team effort.
Matthew?
Yeah, I'm looking. People can't see this, but you have a picture behind you that looks like it ought to have a bunch of kids in it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And tell me, do you go and interact with those kids? Tell me what that's about.
So, Brian Stevenson, who wrote the book Just Mercy, talks about being proximate to the work. I take pride in being proximate to the community in which we're trying to uplift and serve. So, being at the warehouse where the tagline is 4 teens by teens, where we have a teenager who is our board chair, where we employ 25 teens. Being a part in proximate to the community, the most low-income community, where 70% of our children live in poverty in the Riverside neighborhood. I continuously have to make sure that I don't get removed and stay in the boardroom or stay, in conversations with corporate CEOs. But I have to get proximate, because if I'm not listening to what's going on, then I can't make best utilization of the resources that are provided and that I'm entrusted with to then, divvy out into the community.
So you make it sound like you have to do that, but I'm guessing you enjoy doing that, don't you?
I absolutely enjoy it. It's a fun part. I mean, being around youth all day, that energy that they have, that creativity, the fact that they're not jaded any longer in life, and we come up with ideas and they say, no, we can do that. And I'm like, you're daggone right, let's do it.
What's the website address, Logan, of this organization known as Reach Riverside, et cetera?
So the website is workgroup.org, WRKgroup.org, and that is all 3 organizations coming together for the greatest collective impact.
Excellent. We're speaking with Logan Herring, CEO of Reach Riverside and work.org. And
workgroups.org.
Workgroups.org. This is Herb Cohen. We'll be back in a moment right after this break.
Recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, Executive Leaders Radio. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, ExecutiveLeadersRadio.com. Simply visit ExecutiveLeadersRadio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, ExecutiveLeadersRadio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable. Yes, this radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit ExecutiveLeadersRadio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors for free exposure.
Back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, and we'd like to introduce Jim Price, president of Aegis Property Group. Jim, what is Aegis Property Group? What do you folks do?
We are a real estate development management services firm. We help our clients plan, design, and construct major real estate projects on their campuses.
Cool. And where are you from originally?
I'm from Reading, Pennsylvania, about 1 hour from Philadelphia.
And how many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
I'm the youngest of 5, and my oldest brother is 25 years older than I am.
So what was the effect of your brother, who was 25 years older, on you?
It was interesting, and it gave me kind of a second set of parents and a lot of nieces and nephews who were similar to being brothers. But it really, I think, highlighted my mom, who had to raise 5 kids over the span of many, many years.
Mm-hmm. Your mom, huh? Uh-huh. All right. And I understand as a kid that you had a cleft lip and a cleft palate when you were younger. And how'd that affect you? What'd that do to you?
Well, I still have it. It doesn't go away. So I had surgeries as a young kid, but what I recall is Mom took me to hospitals and doctors almost monthly. And it just expressed to me that she was always looking out for me, the youngest kid of 5. And here I came along with having a deficiency, and she just loved me. So she took great care of me, and that's taught me a lifelong lesson.
Wait. How did Mom's love, even though you felt you had this cleft palate thing going on, how did Mom's love affect your building this organization known as Aegis Property Group as president?
Well, I think the main thing is learning to not judge people by kind of what they look like or maybe the color of their skin or anything else. You know, people are all different, and you have to judge them by their character and by their intellect.
So you learned how to read people as a young boy, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, that I agree with. And because I think a lot of people read me the wrong way.
So you learned to read people for who they are, huh?
Yes, sir.
How's that? So is it in business? Is it the strategy that you're brilliant at, or is it your understanding of people?
I'm very good, I believe, at the understanding of people, and that translates to the managing not only the business, but managing our clients and all of the professionals that we work with, because we have incredible teams of people that we have to lead.
I just wanted to make sure I understood. Ethan?
Jim, tell us a little bit about what kind of sports you're into as a teenager between like 8 and 14.
Well, as a kid in Reading, everybody played baseball. We played it every day on the playgrounds. We could walk there and we would just yell each other's names out and say, let's go, we're going to play. I was an okay baseball player, but not good enough to compete in Reading, which was very good. And I gravitated ultimately towards the sport that 2 of my brothers had done, and that is the sport of wrestling, and I devoted really endless hours to that sport.
Why was it that you gravitated to wrestling, and what effect did being a wrestler have on you?
Well, one of the reasons I gravitated, besides my brothers, is I was really small. So I was literally the smallest kid in the class for all of my youth, and the sport of wrestling could accommodate being small, and I was the smallest wrestler on the team, but I could make it into the lightest weight class and compete.
Drew?
What did you get from wrestling? What did you get out of that experience?
Well, I think it's simple. It's the most intense, most demanding sport, I believe, of any, and it's created an intense, fierce, competitive person in me, a drive, a willingness to sacrifice, and a willingness to make a commitment.
Mm-hmm. Did you say you like to even hire past wrestlers?
We have, quite successfully. If I see a resume of a wrestler come across the desk, most always going to be interviewed because we know the character of the person.
Mm-hmm. Matthew?
Yeah, you mentioned before that kind of group of kids you could walk out of your front door and yell and put a game together. And earlier you were telling us you had another group of kids that was the school kids. Which one did you fit in with better?
I think I fit in both pretty well. It was quite competitive in the school arena because we were in advanced classes and everybody wanted to get an A or do better than somebody else. But that competition was driving and fun. The people in the neighborhood, it was primarily about play and having fun, and that was easy to get along with everybody on that basis.
And tell me, what did you learn from going between those two groups that you use today in your business?
The difference between different groups, different people's opinions, different goals, different objectives. You need to kind of adapt to who you're dealing with. Not everybody's the same, and you need to manage accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Daly?
Well, you talked about wrestling. You talked about school. What influences did you have?
The big influencers were specific school teachers. I can remember bragging to my junior high school teachers that my brother was a school teacher, and I just thought it was incredible that I had a brother that could do that same job. And, of course, the wrestling coaches, one in particular, his name is Jack Prutzman. About 10 years ago, we went back to Reading and we celebrated his 75th birthday. He influenced one heck of a lot of Reading wrestlers.
So what did you learn from Jack that you bring to work every day?
everything: mental toughness, preparation, the ability to fight even though you might be losing, and the fact that you're on a team and you have to support one another.
Jim, you mentioned earlier that you were very proud that your brother was a teacher, and you mentioned that to your other teachers very proudly. This thing about proud really is deep inside of you, isn't it? How's that affecting your building this business, this proud thing?
Well, what I'm proud of at our business is I am the third president of a 40-year-old company, and I was once partners with the prior presidents. Our founder and the next president and I were all partners at one point, and I'm really interested in continuing the legacy that they've created in our business and carrying it forward.
So I hear, I read in the newspapers, the business is blood and guts. You don't do your job, you're fired. But that's not the way you're building this organization, are you?
No, not at all. We have an organization that we have built over time very carefully, very conservatively, and as a result, no, it's not blood and guts. It's taking care of people. It's a family.
Drew, what else you thinking?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the wrestling team, and even though it's an individual sport, I was just curious what your teammates would tell us about you.
Well, they would say I was one of the captains, I was one of the leaders, and I helped them focus on what captains on teams do, doing the drills properly, doing the calisthenics properly, encouraging people to make weight, and bringing the team together in the cases where we could, of having fun and doing fun things too.
Ethan?
Jim, what can you tell me about your most memorable wrestling meet when you were a kid?
Unfortunately, it's probably the one I lost, senior year as I was trying to make my way towards the state tournament. So I shouldn't have lost, but I did, and that was not that's the most memorable, I guess.
And what'd you learn from that experience?
Oh man, I cried after that. My high school career was over, and I just realized, okay, while that was super important, it wasn't the end of the world, and you had to live for tomorrow and move on.
How'd you realize that?
I think it's just the way life unfolds. The tomorrow comes whether you like it or not, no matter what happened today. And so when tomorrow comes, you have to wake up and deal with it, even though you just got your butt kicked yesterday.
And how about your family? Did they come? Did they support you at these matches?
My closest brother in age did religiously. He took videos of all my matches. They're somewhere in storage. It was interesting that my parents didn't come to watch. My father was fairly old, but my mother, her phrase was, "James, I don't want to see you break your neck." So she would not come.
What did it mean to you to look over and see your brother there every time?
Unbelievable. He drove us to not just, he came to all of our matches, but every summer he drove us to tournaments that we would go throughout the state of Pennsylvania to improve our wrestling skills on every weekend of the summers.
Mm-hmm. What's the website address of this organization known as Aegis Property Group?
Aegis, AEGIS.com.
We've been speaking with Jim Price, president of Aegis Property Group, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Matthew, could you give us a rundown on who we've had the opportunity of hanging out with today?
Sure, Ken, Herb. It's been a really great show today. We started off with Loree Jones, the CEO of Philabundance. Then we had Heather Templeton Dill, the president of the John Templeton Foundation. We had Logan Herring, the CEO of Reach Riverside. And we just wrapped it up with Jim Price, the president of Aegis Property Group.
All righty. I'd like to thank my co-hosts, including Shannon Lane, Newmark Knight Frank, Drew Hanlon from Hanlon, Ethan Milrod, Go2 Tech, Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, and Daley Tipton, Evolution Energy Partners, for giving me a hand structuring the questions, hopefully providing our listening audience an educational and entertaining show. I'd like to thank our listening audience for listening. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a radio show. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com, to learn more about our executive leaders. Thank you for joining us today, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.